In this last video, I'm going to talk about painting the background for your contour portrait. And your first step is choosing what color you want your background to be. So I recommend choosing a color that's going to create some nice contrast with your original color, right? A color that's different from your original color. So for my original color, it was kind of a red violet. That means I probably don't want to choose red or violet for my background because it will look almost exactly the same as my portrait. Now, if you really wanted to have that look where the background is really similar, that's okay. As long as you do a nice job applying the paint for your background, you can choose any color you want. So I still do recommend though, rather than choosing a color straight out of the tin, like pure green, I recommend mixing your own green, right? Or rather than using pure red, mix in a little black with your red, or mix in a little yellow with your red so that you can create a red that's more interesting. So back to choosing a color that has nice contrast. Some good options for nice contrast are colors on the opposite side of the color wheel. So yellow-green is the complementary color of red-violet. It is the exact opposite. That could be a great choice for your background, but really anything in this whole range could work really well if you want to create nice contrast. These colors are very different from the color that you chose. So that's one idea. You also want to think about, do you want a dark background or a light background? And again, that's just a matter of choice. So I think for my background, I'm gonna go with like a yellow-green-ish, but I'm gonna make it a little bit neutral just because I always like to neutralize my colors. I think it makes them more interesting and unique. So, move this down here. I am starting with some yellow. Joop. And then I'm gonna add either a little green, but I'm just gonna use a little blue. I think that mixing them straight from the primaries creates more interesting colors. So added a little blue. Even just by mixing it that way, it created a color that's already kind of a neutral color. If I wanna neutralize it a little bit, I'll add just a tiny, tiny bit of red to neutralize it a little bit more. And then I can always test it, you know, I can put it on the back of my color scale, test it out, hold it next to the color to see, do I like those colors together? And I do. So that's what I'll do. I'll put that in for my background. Now, when you paint the background, I recommend the wet into wet technique again to create a nice, smooth, flowy background. So I'm gonna put my water down first and then add wet paint to my wet water to create a nice, smooth effect. Now, you could even do the same flowy effect that you did for your negative space flowers if you wanted to, where you add more than one color and they sort of swirl together. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm just gonna stick with one color. You may need to remix it a few times, which is what I'm doing right now that you can't see because I'm running out of paint. And this is a large area, so it takes a lot of paint. So I'm trying to kind of mix a great big amount of it so I don't have to keep remixing over and over. There we go. So then, now that I have my color, I can add it into my water. And you can use your brush to kind of spread it out. This is where I recommend, if you have multiple brush sizes, going back to a bigger brush again. It'll make your life faster. And you could have an effect where it's darker by the head, fading out to light, which I realize is kind of what I'm doing just by accident, but you could also just have your color come all the way to the edges. And remember, if your paper really starts bending, if there's a lot of water on there, you can always just carefully use your paper towel to blot some up from the edges. And also, if your paper bends a lot in this step, sometimes that's just kind of unavoidable depending on the paper. You could also, when it's completely dry, you could put some heavy books resting on top of it. Make sure they're clean books, and then that'll flatten it out. So anyway, I'm not gonna do the whole thing, but I would go ahead and paint in the other side of my background with my color also. right? To create unity, I'm doing the same color all around on both sides. And when you're done, then you are finished with your contour portrait with your monochromatic color scheme. Great job.